Hi folks, this is a demo on how to use Inkscape to create files to be cut on the Glowforge 3D laser printer or laser cutter, whatever you want to call it. I'm gonna assume that you don't really have any experience using a laser cutter or using Inkscape, so this is a pretty basic, pretty beginner's demo. I hope that it's going to be helpful if you are new to laser cutting, Glowforge, or Inkscape. So first, I'm using Inkscape version 0.92. You can download it for free at inkscape.org for Windows, Mac, Linux. This file, demo.svg, this is going to be the finished file of the project that I am going to create in this video, so you can kind of see what it looks like at the end. But I'm going to start a new file to kind of talk you through how to do this from scratch. So I go to File, New Document 2 appears, and I have this A4 sized piece of paper ready to go. That's not actually very helpful because I'm not designing for print. So I'm going to go to File, first thing, Document Properties, and I'm going to change some settings. First of all, the Glowforge works in inches, while the Inkscape defaults to millimeters because, non-US standards, right? Into actual international standards. That's not what the Glowforge is currently doing, so I'm going to change this to inches, and I'm going to change this to inches. This is what things are displayed as. This is just the page size, but it's nice to have them both the same. I'm going to make this landscape a width of 20 inches and a height of 11.5 inches because that's the Glowforge cutting area. Then I'm going to close this. So if you look at, let me zoom in a little bit so I can move it around. All right. So if you look at this sort of piece of quote-unquote paper, that's basically kind of the bed of our Glowforge. Ultimately, it actually doesn't matter where we put our images, where we put the things we want cut out, because, well, I'll show you later in the Glowforge interface, like Glowforge doesn't actually care about the paper size. There are laser cutters out there that do. Glowforge is not one of them, but I will still use this, just the size as a good, as a good scale of what I'm going to be doing, and I'm going to try to work in the bottom left corner, which is where the origin of the page is, 00 in Inkscape. Um, let's see, before I get designing things, I'm going to just show you this tool that I'll be using a lot called a path tool or the curve tool. So I can just click, right, and then I'm not actually clicking and dragging. I'm clicking, letting go, and then clicking, and this will give me kind of corners. And then when I'm done, I'm going to click finish or double click to finish. You can also press enter. And I've created what we call a path. And this path, when you feed it to the Glowforge, it's going to say, okay, I'm going to make my laser move from here along this path to here in order to cut whatever this is, right? Sometimes it does the other way. It's got like this algorithm that optimizes what it does. I don't really know how that goes, but the idea is this is the path that the laser will follow and, cut your material on. So it's important that all your things are kind of in paths as opposed to, bitmaps or raster files. You've probably heard, if you've worked with laser cutters before, that you want vectors, right? Which this is a part of. You want paths as opposed to bitmaps or like Photoshop files and things like that. That's what we need. Okay, so in order to edit this, I can use the select tool, move it around, scale it. Right? I can also use the edit paths by nodes tool, click on that, and then all of a sudden I see all my corners, I see all my nodes, and I can move these nodes around one by one, and it's pretty awesome. Or two by two, since I have both of those selected. I can select all three and move these around. Pretty cool. I can also, if I don't want this piece, I can click on that and then click on this button that says delete segment, and that's gone. If I want a new segment between these two, I could have also clicked and then shift click to select these two. If I want to connect them, I can do. I actually can't join selected things because those are end nodes. Sorry, this one is in the middle, so I couldn't do that, but I can do this. Select those two. There we go. Now they're connected. Right. So that's how you create and work with a path. Um, I'm going to create those quote block designs you saw earlier. So, but before that, I'm going to kind of zoom in because those are all about 1 by 1 designs, and I don't really want to work in a huge scale. So I'm going to zoom in a little more. Now this is 3 inches, a little more. So, okay, this now screen's 2 inches tall. Cool. Um, so in order to do those ornaments or do those little tiles, I need to first create a square, and I can actually just use the rectangles and squares tool. It I was using red rectangles earlier, so it defaulted to that, but it actually doesn't matter what size thickness you have. It does matter what color you're using. I'll talk more about that later. But I'm not going to use the rectangle tool. I want a little more control, so I'll use the path tool. And if I do this, like, this is not a very good rectangle. In fact, it's not even a rectangle. So I definitely want something to guide me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, Document Properties. Notice that there's a tab here, the third one called Grids. I'm going to create a rectangular grid, so kind of make it like graph paper, right? But except the grid units right now are in pixels. I really don't want that. I want inches, and I want the grid spacing to be 1/8 of an inch horizontally and 1/8 of an inch vertically. And then instead of having major grid lines every 5, which I guess is great if you're working in metric, right? I want major grid line every 4. So now you see the background change there, right? This is 4 times 1/8 or a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch square. Okay, so I'm gonna save this before I forget. I'll save this as demo 2. Notice that .svg is the default file name. This that we're using. Scalable vector graphics is a pretty common vector graphics format. The Glowforge software takes this natively. You don't have to convert it to anything else, which is why Inkscape is really nice, because it just works in this natively. I'm going to save that. And now I'm going to create my square. Before I do that, though, I want to make sure that when I draw, I'm actually just not eyeballing this, that the software is snapping me, is guiding me onto this grid. And that's where this toolbar on the right comes in. If you don't see it, it's View, what is it? Oh, there we go. Show high snap controls bar. That's the bar that controls snaps. So you always want to make sure, if you want things to snap, that enable snapping is on. And then these are the ones that I just basically leave on for all my design work. So I want things to snap to grid. And I also want nodes, more in particular cusp nodes and corners, to snap. Because if I don't turn this on, then things like the Inkscape's gonna say, okay, things are snapping to grid, but it doesn't snap anything because you haven't told it to snap these things. So that's something that, it's kind of important. So now all my nodes are gonna snap to the grid. So I'm gonna take my pen tool and I'm gonna draw. Notice how there's a little tooltip that says handle to grid intersection. That means I'm snapping. And there we go. I'm gonna create a square that's a little bit bigger than 1 by 1. That didn't close it up properly, so I'm gonna press enter to make sure it closes properly. There we go. So this is 1 by 1 inch plus an 1/8 inch margin on each side. That's gonna be the outside of my ornament. And then I'm gonna draw some designs in it. Hey, I'm gonna draw a few vertical lines. I'm gonna draw a few horizontal lines. And draw a few more vertical horizontal lines. Just clicking to begin and double clicking to end. And then I'm gonna make a few diagonals. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. So I have my quilt block design in this rectangular ornament. That's great. Except now if I feed this to the Glowforge, it's going to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to cut this square out, and I'm going to cut all these little triangles out along the paths that I just drew. And that's not very helpful because if the Glowforge cuts all of these things out, then I'm going to basically have this rectangular frame and a bunch of tiny triangles floating around. What I want to do is I actually want the Glowforge to score these lines inside instead of cutting them. By scoring, I mean I want the Glowforge to do sort of a low power pass through, so it doesn't cut through the material 100%. It just cuts through maybe like 10%, 5% of the material, so it leaves like a scorch mark, so you'll still see like a distinct like black brown burn mark across, say, a piece of wood, or like a little groove in acrylic, but it doesn't cut through. Right. And the way that the Glowforge differentiates between operations cutting and scoring is through color. So here I can set my stroke style, stroke paint, and I'm going to make it just blue, right? Just a different color than black. So now the Glowforge doesn't actually know that that means scoring. I have to tell it to do it later. But now the Glowforge will know these are two different things, so I can specify two different things, one for each color. Doesn't actually matter which colors you use. There are laser cutters out there that do red. Cutting is always red or something like that. The Glowforge, you can specify anything you want for each color, and so I'm not going to worry about that. There are people who like to do things, in a gradient or like according to RGB values and stuff like that. I don't really worry about that. I'm not, and especially when you're doing just small things, it really doesn't matter. Okay, anyway, if I now save this, that's kind of important, and upload it to the Glowforge software, then I can ask it to score this and then cut this, and then it will come out and it'll be cool. But before that, I want to do the second ornament you saw earlier and also talk about some of the design choices I made while drawing this one and the next one. So let me first start by just copy pasting this. There we go. So I have a second ornament. So now the thing is, what if I don't want these to just be scored? I want things to be filled in. So the Glowforge has three modes of operation. It has cut right through the material. It has score, right? Cut a little bit off the material, and then it has etch, which is basically having the laser kind of pass over this really quickly at a lower power and burn off some material to kind of like color it in by basically burning off the top of the material. And so, I think it'd be cool if I colored in these bottom right triangles. Unfortunately, if I just made this, for example, red pink, then, and say engrave, Glowforge wouldn't really know what to do. It wouldn't do what I want it to do, because if you want to engrave something, that should be a closed path, right? You're filling in something, so it should be closed. So I have to delete this, and I have to make these paths the other way, right, by closing them up. Sounds like a lot of work, but it's not actually not very much work, because I'm going to make these two. Then I'm going to Control C to copy and paste. And notice that as I'm pasting, these triangles that I'm pasting are snapping to the grid as long as my mouse cursor is kind of close to this grid intersection. So not the Glowforge, Inkscape is pretty awesome in terms of working with doing multiple things. So I'm going to make these green, and now if I tell the Glowforge to engrave green stuff, it's going to fill in the green stuff with the laser burning off stuff. Now finally, I'm going to do a path here, and then make that blue, because I want that to be scored as well. So a couple of things. First, the design choice that I made over here, wouldn't it have been easier, right, if I just did the thing with the green triangles and this blue thing I did first, and then copy paste it to go from engrave to score? Like, why did I go through the trouble of making those straight lines? That's because I need closed paths for filling, for engraving, but for scoring, I personally don't want that. And the reason for that is the laser head follows laws of physics. So whenever it goes from, it turns corners, it goes from here to here, for example, it has to slow down and then speed up again, decelerate, accelerate. So if I was to tell it to actually cut this triangle out, then it's going to decelerate here and accelerate here. And even though the Glowforge software is pretty good about this, like, you would still see a small noticeable darker area here because the laser's moving slower here. And also in these major intersections with multiple things, you'll notice that it gets considerably darker if I do corner turn, corner turn, and corner turn. Which is why when I'm scoring, I try to have the laser follow paths that are longer when it's on and not necessarily turn corners while it's on, because right now it's gonna do this, and then it's gonna shut off, start again, and do this, and there's still that acceleration and deceleration there, but it's going to be slightly less, right? Some people don't think it's worth the effort because of the designs that I generally do. Like, designs like these, I notice it personally and it bothers me, so I do this. Okay, anyway, um, one final thing I'm gonna do is, well, there's like this quarter-inch space in between here, and that's kind of a waste of materials, right? So why don't we just like move this here and have the laser cut this out, and there's no wasted material. That's great, except the problem is, notice that, right, there are actually two black lines here, so the laser will cut this path twice, which simultaneously is a waste of energy, a waste of time, and also it could create problems when you're cutting something that only needs one cut twice, because you could essentially introduce kind of sort of more burning onto one of the edges, and or if one of these pieces get cut out first and it falls through, the laser may hit that when it passes through a second time, and you know either damage that or scorch it a little bit. So I don't want this to happen, which means I'm gonna actually delete these. And there's a way of joining them together, but that's more complicated than it's worth right now, honestly. I'm just gonna make it do that, and then that. And then one final thing, I'm gonna make this one red. And the reason for that is because I want this to be cut out first. Then this piece cuts out. Because if the black cuts out first and this little piece falls through and it rotates a little bit, the red won't cut it cleanly in half. Or if it falls through, a even an eighth of an inch, the laser focus may be a little off, and this wouldn't cut all the way through. So the general rule is you want the interior cuts to happen first. The software doesn't determine that for you. It'll algorithmically kind of figure out which cuts are most optimal to make. So I'm doing the two different colors to make it so that I can force the Glowforge to do this interior cut first. So I'm going to save this. I think I already saved it. Just save it one more time. Go to my Glowforge. Whoops, I'm at the shop. Let me go to home. Go to app.glowforge.com. Upload my file, demo 2. Processing, rendering. Almost done. There we go. And right now, my Glowforge is offline, so you don't really see anything. But I'm gonna, it doesn't detect any proof grade materials or anything. So I'm just gonna do medium draft board so I can get it just working. Right. This is the bed of the Glowforge. It's the last thing the Glowforge saw. You'll notice that the sign is at the bottom left corner this of the screen, basically, just like it's the bottom left corner of the page. So you can use the page to control where the design goes on the screen, but considering that like the Glowforge lets you move this thing around and things aren't absolute and numerical, it's not really something that's necessary. You can just completely ignore the page and put things off the page and it'll still be okay. Right. Anyway, I'm just gonna put it here in the right here in the middle-ish area so you can see better. Notice that right now this thing is, this thing has five different steps, and they're all defaulted to cut. The Glowforge just wants to, I don't know, see things burn, so it defaults to cut, and that's really not what I want. So I'm gonna change things. This Notice that when I hover my mouse over, right, the this was the black thing, this was the black edge, and whoops, never mind. There we go. The black edge on the design gets highlighted blue. The Glowforge doesn't keep colors from the SVG file, and it's okay because you can just hover over these things and see what you're working with. Anyway, this is cut. That's great. I do want it to happen last though, because the outside cut I want to happen last. The other cut I want it to happen second to last, interior cut, so we're good there. But these, let's see, this one I wanted to engrave, right? Yeah, those are the bottom right triangles, so I'll convert it to engrave graphic, and notice, hey, Glowforge actually fills it in for you. That's good. And these I want to convert to score, proof gray score, high quality, proof gray score, high quality, and this goes up here. The big difference between high quality and draft scoring, one of the bigger differences, is what I was saying earlier, in terms of the lasers slowing down and speeding up. Draft uses a much faster speed, so that effect in the corners where the laser accelerates and decelerates is much more noticeable. So that's why I definitely want high quality for this one. Okay. And notice that these two are considered separate things, because I think I made a mistake and made this a slightly lighter shade of blue. It really doesn't matter. I can just do them separately. But you can imagine that if there were like 6 of these, it would be kind of annoying. So it's nice to have them all the same color. Anyway, now I have it engraved, score, score, cut, cut, in that order. I like engraving before scoring. Some people like scoring before engraving. Personal choice, I guess, or maybe there's something there that, a problem with scoring first or engraving first I haven't encountered yet. But anyway, I always put cuts last, especially the outside cut. So if my Glowforge was live, I would just click the print button, press the sparkly glowing button on the Glowforge, and a couple minutes, or actually with the engraving, more like about 10 minutes later, I would have these two lovely tiles. But since I don't have that, enabled, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go back to Inkscape for just, one final sort of tip that it's really essential for designing for the laser, Glowforge or otherwise, is that I noticed that I never used a fill, right? Or I could actually just do this, make it pink. I never used a fill for any of these because the Glowforge ignores fills. It doesn't matter that you fill things in when you do engrave or not. The Glowforge knows it's a closed path. It's engraving the insides. It's nice for engraving to have to fill sometimes, to go, oh yeah, I am going to, like, this is what's going to be engraved on the final product. But for other things, it's practically useless. In fact, it may be worse than, useless. Because, for example, if I put a fill here, it covers everything up. So if I accidentally made it, yeah, everything except for the red, I guess. So if I did this, right, I may think that, oh yeah, it's going to cut out this, and then it's going to cut out this, and then it'll be done, because those are the only things my eyes can see. That's not what the laser sees. The laser still sees everything that's underneath. So in order to make sure that you don't do more, the laser doesn't do more things than you think it's doing, it's important to make everything transparent, so your eyes can see all the paths that the laser sees. And speaking of paths, stroke style tells you how big it is. There are times, when you create a file, when you open a file, or you mess with the settings and the stroke becomes invisible, it becomes 0 inches. It is possible. In that case, the laser still sees it. It's still a path. So I would recommend if your laser is cutting out more things than or etching more things than you think there are, just do Control A, select everything, and then change the width to something bigger. The laser does not care about this width. There are laser cutters that do, the Glowforge doesn't. So this width is just for our eyeballs, so, for our working pleasure. So I can make this smaller, thinner, it wouldn't affect the cut at all. Anyway, I'm going to undo that to make it look prettier again. Anyway, that is the end of this sort of tutorial demo. I hope this has been helpful. Yeah, take care.